In my mother's drawer, I found a photo. The baby wasn't me. The paper smelled like cedar and old starch, edges sanded smooth by years. Miriam's hands cradled a newborn swaddled in stripes I never wore. A hospital bracelet shone, numbers unfamiliar, tiny letters refusing my name. On the back, ink bled, a date before my official birth. Another word, curved lonely in blue, returned, written like a secret apology. The envelope had yellow corners, sealed with tape that crackled like leaves. Beside it hid a brass key stamped with 2 letters WG. My pulse climbed stairs I couldn't see, landing hard on confusion's landing. The kitchen clock ticked like a witness who wouldn't swear under oath. I placed the photo flat under the sunlight slanting across our table. Miriam's smile looked tired, wider on one side, brave against an invisible storm. The baby's ear had a folded notch mine never carried through childhood. A lavender ribbon hung from Miriam's wrist, hospital purple, not our usual home colors. Dust motes drifted above the counter like tiny confetti for a wrong celebration. The washing machine thumped somewhere, indifferent judge delivering routine verdicts on cotton. I traced the bracelet numbers slowly, memorizing symbols strangers thought could stay hidden. The newborn's mouth opened, mid-cry, cheeks flushed with effort, eyes squeezed shut. My stomach pulled tight, a chord twanged by fingers I didn't recognize. Outside, gulls argued, their voices thin and sharp, like knives scraping porcelain. Footsteps creaked the hallway. Miriam appeared holding folded towels like small shields. She saw the photo and stopped, breath snagging on something her face refused. "Where did you find that?" she asked, voice polite, careful, too perfectly balanced. "At the back," I said, not moving, matching her calm like porcelain. The towels slid, one corner falling, a white flag that couldn't surrender anything. "Old things bring old aches," she offered, arranging her mouth into practiced sympathy. I watched her eyes, which always told truth faster than her words. They darted toward the brass key, then steadied on nothing at all. The silence between us expanded, a room neither of us had furnished. She crossed the kitchen, gathered the envelope, then hesitated, weighing rehearsal against love. "We keep too much," she tried, but the sentence unraveled before landing safely. I lifted the photo gently, refusing to let history fold itself again. "Who is this child?" I asked, feeling my question touch the floor. Miriam's hand rose halfway, then lowered, as if air had thickened suddenly. "A mistake," she said, the word fragile, unfit to hold a heartbeat. Behind her, the dryer beeped, cheerful, careless, grotesquely confident about endings. I studied the inked date, a bruise spreading beneath neat cursive years. Miriam looked past me, toward the window, where the sea pretended everything stays. My name felt heavier, as if letters carried weights I'd never noticed before. Miriam didn't follow me when I left the kitchen, but her silence did. It hung in the hallway, pressed against my back, breathing in time with my steps. I locked the photo in my desk drawer, though locking didn't stop the questions. At dinner, she hummed that same old tune, gentle, off-key, and desperate for normal. Every sound felt choreographed, a dance to keep me calm. The fork scraped my plate, her eyes flicked upward, waiting for me to ask again. I didn't. Sometimes power hides in patience, and I wanted her to wonder what I knew. When she said, "You were always a curious child," I heard the plea inside the compliment. Her smile trembled just once before she looked away. That night I searched the photo again under my desk lamp's narrow beam. The handwriting on the back glowed faintly. The word "returned" looked pressed, not written like someone traced guilt into paper. The date sat 2 weeks before my certificate seal. Hospital ink codes in the corner read WG04A. I typed those letters into my phone. Willowgate Maternity Home, closed 1987, license revoked for procedural irregularities. The words lifted goosebumps across my arms. I opened my birth file in the metal box beneath my bed. 2 nurses had signed, both names nearly illegible, one beginning with C. My mother's handwriting wasn't on any line. I'd never noticed before how blank the paper felt beneath the official stamps. The next morning, Miriam found me already dressed, coffee half gone. "You're up early," she said, her voice rehearsed soft. "I dreamed of the beach," I lied. She smiled, grateful for distraction. "We should go again soon," I nodded, wondering if the beach she imagined had the same horizon as mine. Before leaving for work, she reached for her keys, and I saw it the small brass one stamped WG, Same letters as the photo corner. I asked, "That key, what's it for?" Her hand froze, grip tightening. "Old lockbox," she said too fast. "From my nursing days." I didn't remember her ever being a nurse. I waited until she left before opening her closet again. In the top shelf, beneath folded quilts, sat a torn receipt, Willowgate Storage Services. Annual renewal. The ink had faded, but not enough to hide her name. I took a photo, heart racing. The dryer buzzed, echoing the night before, mechanical and cruelly ordinary. I whispered, "You're hiding something from both of us, aren't you?" The room didn't answer, but the air felt heavier. Outside, fog rolled in, thick, muffling the morning. I held the photo against the window glass, the baby's tiny face staring into the gray. "Who are you?" I asked softly, and for the first time, I wasn't sure which one of us needed to answer. I emptied the hallway closet and found a shoebox labeled "Winter Scarves Only." Inside lay receipts curled like sleeping bugs, dates lining up with the Willowgate closure. One ticket listed Basement Archives, Unit 14B, handwriting familiar as Miriam's grocery lists. A brittle postcard warned, "Storage fees overdue," stamped months after my last birthday. A faded visitor's pass bore Miriam's maiden name and a smudge of purple ink. Tucked beneath, a Bible margin hid a nurse's cap tagged L. Carver. The thread matched the lavender ribbon from the photo wrapped around Miriam's wrist. I photographed everything, my hands steady while my breath forgot how to behave. In our family album, baby bracelets lay glued, numbers misaligned by a single digit. Small differences accumulate like sand. Then one day, they bury a house. I traced the brass key's grooves with a pencil, mapping its stubborn teeth carefully. WG shone dull under the lamp, a small sun powering locked memories. Miriam cooked salmon, humming that tune, pretending the house didn't creak differently tonight. "Long day?" she asked, setting plates like peace treaties between strangers. I nodded, counting the beats between her breath and her practiced questions. "Found anything interesting while cleaning?" Landed like a coin pushed across velvet. "Dust," I said, and the lie sounded kinder than our fragile truth. Her shoulders dropped, relieved, then tightened, as if guilt still remembered choreography. While she washed dishes, I photographed the key resting by the salt. Evidence doesn't argue, it waits, patient as tide and twice as certain. Night pulled the house close, and I let a memory open its window. Fever night when I was 6, forehead burning, shadows trembling on my walls. Miriam rocked me, humming that lullaby I never heard again afterward. She whispered, "Stay, stay." Not to me, but to something already leaving. Her tears fell on my blanket, counted by the lamp's nervous halo. I asked, "Who's going?" And she kissed my hair without answering. In the morning, she baked cinnamon toast and called the song a silly dream. I stopped asking, like children do when answers rot joy from inside. Now the tune returned, and the words I'd forgotten found their shapes. The chorus fit the photo's edges. Grief had taught her all the verses. Fog swallowed the streetlights while I organized clues on the dining table. Bracelet numbers, storage slip, nurse cap, and the postcard stamped with threat. I listed questions in block letters to keep panic from eating grammar. Why returned? Why Carver? Why a date before my certificate pretended certainty? A web formed, threads leading to Willowgate like ants to something sweet. I searched property maps. Unit 14B sat beneath the old laundry room. The closure article mentioned procedural irregularities and placement corrections, language groomed to hide cruelty. I wrote tomorrow's plan: spare batteries, gloves, cash, and a polite lie. The final line pinned my chest to the wood like a butterfly. I have to know the truth, even if it erases the name I learned. The morning came with pale light and a kind of clarity that burned. I packed a thermos, gloves, flashlight, and a small voice recorder, pretending the list meant control. Miriam left for her volunteer shift, and I watched her car disappear, counting seconds before freedom. The Willowgate address waited in my phone like coordinates to a buried self. When I reached the edge of town, fog still lingered, curling through fence holes like reluctant ghosts. The hospital stood abandoned, windows boarded, ivy gripping the stone like it remembered holding secrets. My breath fogged the air as I pressed through the rusted gate, the sign half torn, "Willowgate Maternity Home, a safe start for every family." The irony tasted metallic on my tongue. Inside, dust covered everything except the graffiti carved by teenagers chasing thrill. The smell of mold and iodine clung to the hallways, an old argument between life and decay. My flashlight caught the edge of a corridor leading down to the basement, a paper taped beside it, edges burned. Archive storage authorized only. The key in my pocket fit perfectly into the lock, clicking with an intimacy that frightened me. The stairwell exhaled cold air as if the building sighed at being remembered. At the bottom, rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers tagged with faded letters. A broken desk sat beneath a flickering bulb. On it, a ledger waited, open as if expecting me. I flipped through pages, names handwritten in slanted ink columns for infant code, maternal alias, disposition. Next to HQ was a note, deferred release, see Dr. L. Carver. My stomach lurched. The edges of the paper were damp, smudging history into rumor. I found a tin box in the bottom drawer, its latch stiff with rust. Inside lay a hospital bracelet, smaller than my wrist, engraved with the same number from the photo. I held it up to the light, the digits reflecting like they still belonged to someone. Beneath it, a folded document sealed with medical insignia. The wax cracked easily, the contents did not. It was a transfer authorization, naming my mother and another woman recipient, Celia Brandt. My mind splintered quietly. Footsteps echoed behind me. I froze, listening. A man's voice, steady but hoarse, called out, "You shouldn't be here." I turned, flashlight slicing through dust. A thin man in his 70s leaned on a cane, coat too large, badge clipped to his collar, property supervisor. He squinted, then sighed. Another one looking for the past. I steadied my voice. "Did you know Dr. Carver?" He hesitated. "We all did," he said. He ran the place like a machine, said families were factories, you just had to match the parts right. His words fell heavy, mechanical, cruel. "Did you know my mother?" I asked. "Miriam Quinn." He blinked, recognition softening his tone. "Pretty girl. Brought her baby twice, left with one once." I wanted to speak, to scream, to demand more, but the words drowned under the weight of confirmation. He gestured toward a shelf near the wall. "Anything still left is there. Most burned when they closed us down." His voice cracked. "We didn't know what we were doing was wrong back then." I nodded numbly, though my heart disagreed. I took the bracelet, the ledger page, and the sealed document, thanking him through clenched teeth. As I climbed the stairs, daylight hit my face like judgment. Outside, I sat in my car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. The engine refused to start at first, as if warning me there was no going back. I whispered to the photograph folded in my pocket, "I found you." Kendra Wu read the ledger copy twice, then looked at my shaking hands. Her office smelled like paper and peppermint, a calm I wanted to borrow. "We preserve chain of custody from this second," she said, voice trimmed of softness. She handed me evidence, sleeves, gloves, and a checklist that felt like scaffolding. "Photograph each item beside a newspaper for date anchoring," she instructed carefully. I breathed slower under her certainty, a rhythm learned in emergency waiting rooms. "We'll subpoena Willowgate's successor entity and Carver's personal archive," she added, pen tapping. "If Carver coded eugenics, we'll make his codes read like confessions." She called Mateo Briggs, speakerphone filling the room with a reporter's measured curiosity. "Bring copies," he said, "and your patience. Truth hates being rushed." Mateo met us at a coffee shop where the lights hummed like bees. He wore quiet like armor, listening more than he ever spoke carefully. I slid the bracelet across the table, numbers glinting like stubborn constellations. "Photograph with macro. We'll match grooves to Willowgate's engraving patterns," he said. Kendra outlined a flow. Affidavit from the property supervisor, notarized statement, evidence index. "We avoid confronting Miriam until the record can carry our weight," she warned. I nodded, feeling loyalty and suspicion wrestle behind my ribs silently. Mateo's eyes softened when he saw the word returned, bleeding through paper. "We'll find the story," he promised. Not romantic, only reliably relentless. I exhaled, realizing hope sometimes sounds exactly like logistics pronounced flawlessly. 600 words. We drove to the storage unit listed on Miriam's fading receipt. The clerk frowned until Kendra produced a letterhead that ironed wrinkles from resistance. Unit 14B smelled of mildew, lemon cleanser, and a century's worth of dust. Boxes collapsed inward like exhausted lungs, labels curling into illegible whispers and fragments. Under a tarp, a milk crate held reels, tags, and carbon copies. Mateo gloved up, filming my hands opening envelopes with trembling, deliberate care. Inside lay intake cards stamped with Willowgate's lavender ink and sharp initials. One read HQ, then a crossed-out arrow toward Brant. Celia conditional release pending. My body chilled, summer evaporating in an airless rush of remembered lullabies. Kendra whispered, "Photograph, seal, and breathe. Collapse later where walls catch you." We rented a portable scanner and fed each page through its patient mouth. Mateo recorded file order, timestamps, and the smell notes Kendra insisted we log. "Juries believe noses and clocks," she said, oddly gentle and astonishingly precise. A microfilm index listed, "Returns day attendance required Carver presiding, dated 14 months pre-closure." My stomach turned. Ritualized cruelty had always invented ceremonial names for itself. The crate's bottom revealed a memo. "Compatibility flags ensure best-fit family outcomes." The language wore lab coat politeness over a skeleton made of theft. Kendra's jaw tensed, but her hand stayed surgeon steady over evidence sleeves. "We're building a mirror he cannot dodge," she said, almost to herself. I realized strategy could feel like prayer when spoken without theatrics. We paused only when hunger made the room tilt like a slow ship. Pizza arrived, grease spotting the corner of a copy we replaced quickly. Mateo asked about Miriam's lullaby, and my voice broke open briefly. "She only sang it that fever night," I said, hearing the notes again. "Maybe that's when decision welded to her bones," Kendra murmured quietly. I pictured Miriam at a desk, pen shaking over paper she hated. I didn't excuse her. I recorded her, because truth demands better offerings. Mateo said, "We publish when filings hit, not before. Surprises protect survivors." I nodded, grateful his caution didn't sound like cowardice or hunger for spectacle. We finished indexing the crate while dusk folded itself neatly outside carefully. The next morning brought drizzle that turned the air to glass. We met at Mateo's newsroom, a cramped second floor above a print shop that smelled of ink and ambition. His desk overflowed with documents, coffee cups, and small victories. "You'll want to see this," he said, pulling up the hospital's financial archive on his monitor. A scanned receipt flickered Carver's signature beside a corporate account labeled Brant Foundation Research Donations. The same surname stamped on my transfer authorization. My lungs forgot their schedule. Kendra leaned in, reading quietly. He monetized the swap's placement corrections disguised as philanthropic study. Mateo exhaled. "It's a supply chain," he said. "Children, donors, reputation all cataloged like lab specimens." My reflection in the screen didn't blink fast enough to look alive. We tracked Carver's current whereabouts through professional directories and alumni bulletins. Retired now, he lectured occasionally on medical ethics in historical context. The phrase scraped something deep inside me. Kendra drafted correspondence under pseudonym to request an interview about Willowgate's closure. "We need him talking before he suspects," she explained. Mateo smirked faintly. "He loves legacy more than guilt. Mention a book deal." I half laughed, half cried. The absurdity stung like salt. We scheduled a call for Friday afternoon. "Record everything," Kendra said. "Let him build his own gallows politely." Outside, rain thickened, hammering the roof like applause for ghosts. I stared at the window, wondering if Miriam ever stood here, waiting for courage to become confession. That night, I visited her without warning. She sat knitting by the television, the same news cycle looping faces I didn't recognize. The photo and brass key lay in my pocket like heartbeats. "Mom," I said softly, and she flinched, the yarn tightening around her fingers. "Why didn't you tell me about Willowgate?" Her needles froze mid-air. "You went there?" she whispered, voice brittle as ice cracking. "You kept it from me," I said, trying not to sound like accusation, but truth never fits politely. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. "You were sick," she said. "They told me you wouldn't last the night." I waited, breathing through my teeth. "Then they offered another baby," she continued. "Healthy, same blood type, same time." Her words came out flat, rehearsed over decades of survival. "And you said yes?" I asked. "I said please," she answered. The silence that followed was heavier than anger. "Did you ever think of her, the other baby?" I asked finally. Miriam's lip trembled. "Every night," she said. "They said she died, but I never saw her." Her voice cracked open on the last word, thin as paper. "Carver told me it was Mercy." My stomach turned. Mercy had never sounded so manufactured. I left without slamming the door, because rage didn't deserve the sound. Outside, rain cooled my face while grief warmed my chest from inside out. I texted Kendra and Mateo one word. "Confirmed," Mateo replied. "Then let's confirm him next." When Friday came, Carver's voice spilled through the speaker, calm and clinical. Willowgate was a product of its era, he said. Families sought solutions, and we provided structure. Kendra kept her tone even. You mean commerce? He chuckled. A matter of perspective, dear. Each word felt like a syringe sliding into history's vein. I asked, do you remember the name Miriam Quinn? Silence. Then a pause dressed in arrogance. Yes, he said finally. Her case was delicate, an exchange justified by survival probability. My recorder blinked red, hungry, and patient. I looked at Kendra. She nodded once, the smallest motion of war beginning. Truth had a voice now, and it was ready to be heard. The recording filled the small office like cold wind. Carver's voice moved between arrogance and nostalgia, the tone of a man who believed cruelty could be sterilized with vocabulary. We corrected placements for social compatibility, he said. Healthy environments yield healthier children. Kendra's knuckles whitened on her pen. Mateo mouthed, keep him talking. I swallowed and said, you traded lives like lab results. He laughed lightly. No, my dear, we curated futures. Some parents were unsuited, others more capable. It was pragmatic. I could almost hear the smile stretching across his words. And Miriam Quinn? I asked. She begged, he said, unbothered. Cried, signed, left with hope. We gave her a version of motherhood that wouldn't haunt her later. I couldn't speak. Every sound in the room, clock, breath, machine hum, turned traitor to my pulse. Kendra ended the call quietly, her finger trembling as she tapped recording saved. No one spoke for a long time. Mateo finally whispered, he thinks he's a savior. I said, he's a thief wearing a stethoscope. The silence after my voice cracked open the air. Now we have motive, confession, and pattern, Kendra said, eyes sharpening back to strategy. But we'll need Miriam's statement for corroboration. I shook my head. She's broken enough. She's essential, Kendra replied softly. If this goes public, it's her redemption too. I looked at the window, fog pressing against glass like unasked forgiveness. Somewhere out there, the child in the photograph had lived or hadn't. Either answer would wound differently but equally deep. That night, I drove back to the house, headlights carving tunnels through mist. Miriam waited in the kitchen, tea untouched, eyes rimmed red. You talked to him, she said without question. I heard it in your step. I nodded, sitting opposite her. He told me you begged, I said, voice steady. She looked down, fingers tracing the mug's chipped rim. I did, she whispered. They said you wouldn't breathe another day. Then he showed me her, the other baby. Perfect skin, steady pulse, no wires. Her words trembled. I thought I could love her enough to forget. She looked up, meeting my gaze. But you lived. They called it a miracle. I called it punishment. Tears slid silently, honest and exhausted. I wanted to hate her then, but the sight of her small hands shaking broke something softer. You should have told me, I said quietly. I couldn't, she answered. I didn't know how to explain surviving both mercy and theft. She pulled open a drawer, revealing a box wrapped in newspaper. Inside lay a second photo, her standing beside a young woman holding the same baby from before. Celia Brandt, she said, voice fading. They sent me this years later. Said she wanted to thank me. My stomach hollowed. The woman in the picture looked eerily like me. She's alive, I whispered. She might be, Miriam said, but Carver would never confirm it. I tried writing once. The letter came back marked deceased. The word deceased scraped against my ribs like broken glass. Mateo called soon after. His assistant just confirmed Carver's keynote next week, Founders Weekend, Willowgate Anniversary Panel. His voice carried static and excitement. We can make the truth speak itself there. I stared at Miriam's trembling hands, at the decades she'd spent guarding silence mistaken for safety. Then we do it, I said, for both of us. She nodded, too tired for fear, too full of love for denial. When I hung up, the rain began again, softer this time, like the world exhaling after a long deception. The auditorium shimmered with polite applause as Dr. Lionel Carver approached the podium. His silver hair caught the spotlight, his smile trained to suggest wisdom without empathy. Tonight, he began, we celebrate the legacy of Willowgate Maternity Home, an institution devoted to compassion. I stood at the back, hidden by shadow, camera pressed to my chest. Kendra sat 3 rows from the front, phone recording, her legal calm masking anticipation. Mateo managed the live stream disguised as press coverage, his cursor resting over a folder labeled Truth. Zip. The audience, donors, faculty, civic leaders waited for nostalgia to feed their vanity. On the screen behind Carver, a slideshow flickered through staged photos. Nurses with perfect posture, cradles lined in symmetry. The caption, "A Century of Care." My hand trembled, hovering over the signal text. He spoke of pioneering methods, of ethical innovation, of families saved through science. His voice rolled like lullabies written by committees. Miriam sat near the aisle, small, rigid, hands folded like repentance incarnate. When her eyes met mine, she gave the faintest nod. It was time. I pressed send. On the giant screen, the slideshow stuttered, paused, then bled into black. The next image appeared, not smiling nurses, but microfilm stills of Carver himself, shaking hands with donors beside. Bassinets labeled "Returned." Gasps rippled, quick and sharp. Carver blinked, adjusting his glasses. "A technical error," he stammered. The screen ignored him. My voice, steady, recorded the night before, filled the hall. Dr. Lionel Carver called it mercy. He called it correction. But he never called it theft. The next clip rolled audio from our interview. "We curated futures," his voice echoed. Miriam Quinn begged. The crowd murmured like a sea turned violent. Kendra stood, calm as judgment. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said loudly, "what you're hearing are his own words, documented, time-stamped, verified." Carver's face flushed, his hand gripping the podium. "This is defamation," he shouted, but the word broke halfway through. Mateo hit the secondary trigger, releasing the zip file to every registered guest's email. Phones buzzed, screens glowed, whispers multiplied. The reel ended with a still image. Miriam holding the baby that wasn't me, Carver's signature across the bottom. Silence fell, a silence so deep it roared. Miriam rose, tears glinting but her voice steady. "I was told my daughter had died," she said. "I was told another child would save me. You stole my grief and sold it back as charity." Carver tried to speak, but words drowned in the noise of truth coming alive. Reporters surged, flashes igniting like small explosions. "Security!" someone yelled, but the guards hesitated, unsure which side decency stood on. Kendra turned to me, whispering, "We're done. It's his turn now." I felt no joy, only exhaustion shaped like relief. Carver's carefully constructed world cracked audibly. His mic slipped from his hand, the sound feeding the speakers a small, metallic gasp that ended his empire. Outside, the air carried applause and disbelief tangled together. Miriam stood beside me, shoulders shaking but lighter somehow. "You did it," she said softly. I shook my head. "We did." The sirens arrived, distant, polite, as if the law itself had to approach carefully. Mateo filmed the aftermath without commentary, the camera catching reflections of our faces on glass doors. Ghosts turned witnesses. Inside the hall, the crowd still murmured, the screen still frozen on Carver's final word, "Returned." For the first time in decades, the name meant something different. It meant what was stolen finally came home. The next morning dawned quiet, too calm for what we'd unleashed. Headlines blurred across every feed: "Doctor exposed for eugenics scheme, Willowgate families demand justice." The words felt heavy but necessary, like surgery done without anesthesia. Kendra called before sunrise. "They'll try to reframe this as a misunderstanding," she said. "Stay silent until the filings go through." Silence was easy. Peace was harder. I stood at the window watching the tide pull away, carrying decades of lies out to sea. Miriam slept on the couch, exhaustion finally giving her mercy. Her face looked younger in stillness, stripped of guilt scaffolding. The house smelled like coffee and disinfectant, a strange mix of healing and aftermath. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving someone else's story. I was writing my own. By noon, the calls began. Journalists, advocates, families who'd lived versions of our nightmare. I didn't answer most. I wasn't ready to become a symbol. Mateo texted updates. Carver under investigation, hospital trustees resigning, board frozen in panic. His restraint impressed me. He never mentioned my name once. Kendra arrived with folders, her calm returning like a tide meeting sand. "You'll need these," she said, handing over affidavits for signatures. "Carver's deposition is next week. They'll settle before trial, but we'll demand record preservation first." Her voice was sharp enough to carve a path through confusion. I signed everything without hesitation, each stroke cleaner than the last. Revenge wasn't fire anymore, it was paperwork filed precisely on time. Later, Miriam woke, rubbing her eyes like a child who dreamed too deeply. "Did we really do it?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "We told the truth loud enough." She nodded, tears quick but quiet. "He took everything," she whispered. "My name, your beginning, my peace." I sat beside her. "Then we take it back, piece by piece." She laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. "I never thought truth could sound kind," she said. I smiled. "It's only kind when it's finished being cruel." Outside, gulls circled above the shoreline, their cries sharp and freeing. For once, the sky didn't look like judgment. It looked like closure arriving late but steady. The days after felt almost ceremonial. We cataloged every document, labeling folders not by case number but by meaning: loss, return, proof. Miriam kept the box that held the original photo, now sealed in clear plastic. "It belongs to both of us," she said. I agreed. The brass key hung on a hook by the door, no longer mysterious, just history, finally unlocked. Kendra helped us create a formal archive for victims' families, a way to ensure the story stayed useful, not pitied. "Justice," she said, "has to stay busy or it rots." Mateo filmed interviews quietly, his questions respectful, his lens unblinking. When he asked me what revenge felt like, I answered, "It feels like breathing after years underwater." He nodded, understanding more than words allowed. That weekend, I walked to the pier where this search began, wind tangling my hair, salt sharp on my lips. I thought of the baby in the photo, the other child, Celia Brandt's daughter, maybe alive, maybe not. Somewhere, another version of me might have existed, raised in a house built from someone else's loss. The thought didn't hurt anymore. It felt like closure, walking hand in hand with empathy. Miriam joined me later, her steps slow but sure. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" she asked. "No," I said. "I just wish you hadn't been alone in it." She looked out at the water, the sun painting silver lines across her reflection. "You found us both," she said. I reached for her hand, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of children laughing somewhere down the beach. For once, the sound didn't hollow my chest. It filled it. The investigation would go on, names would surface, restitution funds would form, and Carver would finally face a court built from truth. But for now, I let the moment be small, two survivors standing quietly beside the ocean, neither broken nor victorious, just whole enough to begin again. The exhibit came together like a slow heartbeat, finding rhythm again. Mateo's footage was edited into still sequences, no narration, just truth arranged to speak for itself. Kendra handled permissions, careful with every signature, every exhibit label that might be called slander later. We framed photographs under clean glass, the ledger, the consent forms, Miriam's trembling handwriting. Above the display, a plaque read, "Willowgate, remembered, families of the forgotten." It looked simple, almost peaceful, the way graves often do. No one realized the QR codes printed on the back of each pamphlet were portals to recordings, scanned files, proof lined in digital steel. "Art of revenge," Mateo joked quietly, "is making truth look beautiful." Miriam visited the setup on the second day of curation. She wore her old nurse's pin, the one she'd hidden for years, polished bright now. "You're turning ghosts into teachers," she said. I smiled faintly. "They deserve better than silence." Her fingers traced the edge of the glass display where her photo sat. "You'll let them see my name?" she asked, half question, half plea. "All of it," I said. "You were a victim who made a mistake, not a monster." She nodded, relief trembling between her breaths. For the first time, she looked lighter, almost proud. It wasn't forgiveness. It was reclamation. When the exhibit opened, the crowd arrived quiet, unsure if they were entering art or indictment. We'd timed the launch to overlap with Founders Weekend, same venue where Carver's name once shimmered on banners. Now, his legacy hung like fog, visible, unavoidable, and heavy. Kendra moved through the room, greeting donors with the calm precision of someone balancing law and morality on a knife's edge. "You've framed it as remembrance, not accusation," one whispered approvingly. She smiled politely, knowing the trap always works best when it looks like invitation. The first QR code activation happened 30 minutes in. Someone gasped softly, then louder, as Carver's voice filled their headphones. "We curated futures," the whispers began. Each station played a piece of the story. By the fourth, people stopped pretending to sip their wine. Screens flashed evidence, voice logs, and faces once lost to bureaucracy. Mateo's camera captured it all, the dawning recognition, the discomfort of witnesses realizing participation. Outside, the sun dipped, turning the glass walls amber and holy. Miriam stood beside me, hand shaking slightly. "He'll come," she murmured. And he did. Carver, pale and furious, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked too young to understand history's appetite. "Take this down," he barked. "This is a breach of privacy." Kendra approached like calm water. "Public record, verified source, community space," she replied evenly. "Your privacy ended when you built it on stolen lives." His mouth opened, but no sound found courage. I watched him stare at his own face looping on the screen, recorded arrogance dressed as authority. "You edited that," he muttered. I stepped forward. "No, doctor," I said. "You did." He turned toward me then, eyes hollowed by the weight of collapsing narratives. "You don't understand what it was like," he whispered. "We were saving them." His voice cracked on the last word, the kind of break that comes when denial meets daylight. Miriam stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. "You didn't save us," she said. "You labeled us, and now we're relabeling ourselves." Security hovered, unsure whether this was protest or justice. Kendra nodded to Mateo, who triggered the final cue, a recorded message sent to every guest's email. Full archive released, records unsealed, restitution motion filed. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was reverent, like prayer with teeth. Carver sank into a chair, head in his hands, the projector light washing him in the same sterile glow he once ruled from. I didn't feel triumph, only a deep, echoing calm. Revenge, I realized, wasn't destruction. It was restoration. The exhibit didn't just expose him, it restored the truth he'd buried. As the crowd dispersed, I looked at Miriam. She smiled faintly through tears. "You did it," she said. "No," I answered. "We remembered." Night draped over the town like a verdict. The exhibit had ended hours ago, but its echo lingered, half outrage, half awe. Reporters flooded the streets, their headlines morphing into living things. Dr. Carver, confronted by victims. The day Willowgate spoke back. By morning, every inbox in the county would hum with evidence. Still, I couldn't sleep. My body vibrated with the rhythm of completion, but my mind refused to believe it was done. I sat in the dark living room, the projector's afterglow still ghosting my vision. Miriam stirred on the couch, half awake, her breathing shallow but steady. "Did you hear them clap?" she murmured. "Yes," I said. "For you," she smiled faintly, tears cutting clean lines down her face. "No," she whispered. "For her, the other child." Silence answered, heavy but kind. By dawn, the first retaliation began. Anonymous calls, deep voices reminding me that some truths upset expensive people. Kendra texted, "Ignore them. They're rattling empty cages." Mateo sent screenshots. Carver's board resignations, lawyers withdrawing, media swarm growing teeth. "Our job's done," he typed. "Yours now is to live." I wanted to believe him, but victory felt like another trap. Shiny and deceptive. I brewed coffee, staring at the tide crawling over the sand outside. The sea looked indifferent to our justice. It had seen too many small human wars. I wondered if the other baby, Celia Brandt's child, ever walked this shore, unaware of the echo she carried. Maybe she was gone. Maybe she was watching the same sunrise somewhere else, feeling a peace she didn't know was borrowed from mine. By mid-morning, the courthouse filled with reporters. Kendra moved through them like a surgeon, scalpel sharp, her expression carved from resolve. "You don't owe anyone grief on camera," she told me. "Just presence." Inside, Carver sat, flanked by attorneys, his arrogance cracked but not gone. The judge entered, a woman with eyes that looked like they'd seen too many men like him. Kendra presented the chain of custody, her words precise, cutting each lie open like surgical tape. Carver's defense stammered about historical context, but the evidence spoke without trembling. When the microfilm replayed, the judge leaned forward slightly. "Is that your voice, Dr. Carver?" she asked. "It is," he said. That admission, soft, reluctant, absolute, felt louder than any gavel. Miriam squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. "He can't rewrite it now," she whispered. Outside the courtroom, sunlight struck glass doors, scattering reflections like fragments of returned souls. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. A journalist shouted, "Harper, what does justice feel like?" I paused. "Heavy," I said. "But it fits." That line ran under my photo the next morning, but the caption missed what mattered. Justice wasn't a feeling, it was the space truth leaves when it finally sits down. That night, Miriam cooked again for the first time in years. She hummed the lullaby as onions sizzled, and for once, the sound didn't sound like apology. "Do you think people can forgive without forgetting?" I asked. She stirred the pot slowly. "Only if forgetting means letting go of pain, not memory." I nodded, realizing forgiveness had been hiding inside her voice all along. Weeks passed, and Carver's empire crumbled in measured silence. Lawsuits multiplied. The Brandt Foundation issued a statement claiming ignorance, but Mateo's exposé shredded their denials. "You can't plead innocence with your name on the checks," his headline read. Kendra secured unsealing of all Willowgate archives, and families began arriving, mothers with trembling hands, sons with birth certificates that finally made sense. Some found closure, others only ghosts. But closure, I learned, isn't guaranteed. It's earned one truth at a time. Miriam became their unofficial guide, her guilt transforming into purpose. She greeted every family, offering coffee, directions, small comfort. "We can't fix the past," she told one mother softly, "but we can stop it from repeating." Watching her, I realized her redemption wasn't loud. It was consistent. Then one morning, a letter arrived without a return address. Inside, a photograph recent, crisp. A woman stood on a pier I recognized instantly. Our pier, the one Miriam and I visited after the exhibit. The woman's face mirrored mine, same jawline, same uncertain smile. A note on the back read, "For the record, I'm still here. C.B." My heart folded itself in two. I showed Miriam, and she gasped softly, hand covering her mouth. "She's alive," she whispered. "You found her." "No," I said, tears breaking quietly. "She found us." We sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the sea shimmered like forgiveness, endless and patient. That evening, I stood by the water again, holding the photograph against the wind. Two lives, once spliced by greed, now rejoined by truth's persistence. I thought of Carver somewhere counting the pieces of his ruin, realizing control had always been temporary. The sun sank, gold melting into deep blue, and I whispered to the waves, "You can rest now." Revenge had done its work, but peace was just beginning. Behind me, Miriam called out, her voice clear and steady. "Dinner's ready." I turned, smiling, the photo tucked safely against my heart. Justice hadn't rebuilt everything, but it had rebuilt enough for love to find room again. The town changed the way it looked at us after everything broke. Strangers held doors too long, offering sympathy that felt like watching through glass. At the market, voices lowered when Miriam reached for apples and ordinary bread. Someone whispered brave like a diagnosis, not a compliment we could carry. Church bulletins added healing to prayers, then studied whether we bowed correctly. Mateo's article hung behind counters, folded to show Carver's polished face. A barista asked if I missed ignorance, and I tipped without answering. Kendra's voicemail said, "Walk straight, breathe slow, choose your words like evidence." The sea kept its rhythm because the sea refuses to learn gossip. We learned it, then learned how to ignore it. Step by step, families started arriving with backpacks of paper and memories wrapped inside envelopes. Mothers clutched faded photos and names that tasted like salt when spoken. Sons and daughters came carrying certificates that didn't match their faces gently. The archive room filled with breathing, sobbing, and chairs scraping across tile. Miriam poured coffee like medicine, steady hands finally useful without trembling. She said, "Sit," and they did, as though the word mended something. Kendra explained requests, forms, and what patience means when truth moves slowly. Mateo filmed hands, not tears, because hands tell history without stealing privacy. I learned to staple copies while listening for when silence needed company. Together, we made grief administratively visible, which is another way to honor. Not everyone approved of our version of justice blooming in public air. A board member cornered me outside, asking if restitution meant rewriting heritage. "Heritage can handle honesty," I said, and watched his certainty shrink visibly. He warned about donors, reputations, and how towns survive by curated forgetting. I thought of Carver's podium and Miriam's voice overriding the microphone mercilessly. "We survived curation," I answered. "Now we'll survive the truth on purpose." He left irritated, then returned quietly later with a folded apology awkwardly. He whispered, "My mother signed at Willowgate," and handed over a bracelet. People who argued hardest usually did so because their hearts already knew. That day, I stopped taking anger personally. It was fear dressed formal. The confrontation I dreaded came wearing polished shoes and a trembling, practiced smile. Celia Brandt's representative arrived with a letter and the apology fund proposal. He spoke like a man rehearsing empathy into palatable, corporate shapes carefully. "The Foundation regrets," he said, reciting lines meant to soothe newspapers. Kendra stood beside me, calm and sharp, a metronome for fairness. "Regret pays archives," she said, "but restitution funds names finding names permanently." He offered scholarships, plaques, and a memorial garden curving like tasteful sorrow. Miriam shook her head, voice soft, certain, a new steadiness found finally. "Plant trees after you unseal records," she said. "Not before, not instead." He left with less confidence, promise of unsealing. Finally written without wiggle. At home, Miriam's phone rang nightly with voices from years buried under dust. Women asked if the lullaby meant something particular, and she answered gently. She admitted fear openly, told them sorry without letting shame steer sentence structure. I watched her grow taller inside, from apology to anchor with purpose. One evening she sat beside me on the porch and exhaled slowly. "Do you think she'll call?" she asked, eyes drifting toward the pier. She meant Celia's daughter, the woman who stood where we once stood. "She already did," I said, tapping the photograph tucked safely close. "Then I'll practice," Miriam whispered. "So my hello sounds like welcome." The tide agreed, lapping steady, patient, generous, in ways people struggle mastering. School teens filmed themselves outside the exhibit, debating whether forgiveness should require confession. Some mocked, but most spoke softly, as if truth had lowered their volume. One girl asked me if revenge ever stops, or just changes clothes. "It stops when justice starts breathing," I said, surprised by my own answer. She nodded like she understood, then hugged Miriam without over-explaining anything further. The Rotary invited us to speak about heritage, and we accepted carefully. On stage, I described paperwork as rescue, and the room fell thoughtful. Mateo's camera caught Kendra smiling for once, tired but proud of order. Afterward, an old nurse pressed a locker key into Miriam's hand quietly. "More records," she whispered, "because secrets only end when someone chooses ending." The days stretched quietly after the crowds left, like breath held too long. Reporters moved on to fresher stories, their cameras chasing new storms. For us, calm arrived unevenly, a visitor still unsure of its welcome. The archive center kept humming, a low song of restoration and rusted filing cabinets. Kendra's team handled lawsuits from families discovering their lives mislabeled decades ago. Some cases ended with tears and gratitude, others reopened wounds deeper than time should allow. Mateo began filming a documentary, but this time he refused to chase spectacle. "It's not about Carver anymore," he said. "It's about what truth does to people who touch it," I agreed, though I still woke at night hearing Carver's voice calm, clinical, explaining away cruelty as order. One morning I found Miriam outside tending roses, her hands stained red with soil. "They're rooting better this year," she said, smiling faintly. "Like they know the ground's honest now." Her laughter followed, fragile but real. She was lighter, her words unburdened by secrecy. When I joined her, she looked up. "Do you think she'll come?" she asked quietly. She meant Celia Brandt's daughter, the woman who looked like my reflection. "Maybe she already has," I said. The letter still sat framed in the hallway, her handwriting simple, deliberate, certain. "I'm still here." Sometimes that was all survival required. Miriam nodded, pressing another seedling into the earth. "Then we'll be ready when she does," she said. No more running. The town began to heal in strange, uneven ways. The mayor commissioned a memorial wall with names of all children once mislabeled. Some locals called it unnecessary, others called it overdue. I stood at the unveiling beside Miriam and Kendra. The plaque read, "Truth is the final birthright." The air smelled of salt and paint. People left flowers, photographs, even broken bracelets turned to offerings. A young woman approached, her eyes pale blue, her accent faintly coastal. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "My mother was one of them. She said your story made her remember herself." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She smiled softly, and before leaving she added, "Maybe someday you'll find your missing piece too." I watched her walk away, thinking maybe I already had. Weeks later, Carver's death was announced quietly. Heart failure in a seaside clinic, unattended. The news reached us through a one-line message from his attorney, estate to be liquidated for victim restitution fund. Miriam read it aloud, then folded the paper neatly. "He finally gave something back," she said, even if it wasn't on purpose. We didn't celebrate. We simply sat together on the porch, watching the evening spread over the sea. Revenge had ended long before his heart did. What followed was a stillness neither of us expected, a peace that didn't need noise to prove itself. That night, I slept without dreams for the first time since finding that photo in her drawer. When spring came again, we reopened the exhibit for one final showing. The town had changed. Faces looked different in the light of awareness. People spoke to us without whispering first. Children pointed at the displays, asking innocent questions their parents finally answered honestly. Miriam stood by the entrance, greeting visitors like a curator of redemption. At the closing ceremony, Matteo played the final reel. Mothers laughing, families reuniting, quiet faces finally at ease. Then, as credits rolled, he added a line that wasn't scripted, dedicated to those who dared to remember. The crowd applauded softly. No cheers, just the sound of collective release. That evening we walked home under a soft drizzle. Miriam linked her arm through mine, a habit she hadn't shown in years. "You think she'll see it?" she asked. "Celia's daughter?" I smiled. "If she's watching, she'll know where to find us." The sea shimmered under the streetlights, calm and endless. The house ahead glowed faintly through the mist, our house now. No more shadows hiding behind its walls. When we stepped inside, the air smelled of rain and lavender. Miriam looked around and whispered, almost to herself, "It's finally ours." And for the first time, I believed her. Completely. Morning light touched every wall of our home, as if blessing it clean. The sea breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying laughter from children walking to school. I brewed coffee, hearing Miriam hum her lullaby, the one that once meant loss, but now meant survival. The past no longer pressed on our chests. It sat beside us quietly, acknowledged, harmless. I watched her pour 2 cups, hands steady, no tremor left. "It feels like I can breathe again," she said softly. "You can," I answered. The brass key still hung by the door, tarnished but untouchable now. Sometimes I'd trace its edges before leaving, a small ritual of gratitude for the truth it opened. Life wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was enough. Weeks passed like quiet music. Families kept visiting the archive, and each time Miriam greeted them with the same gentle steadiness. Some days, she read to children born from paperwork instead of lullabies. Other days, she gardened until her nails were lined with earth and forgiveness. Kendra moved to the city to open a legal foundation, the Carver Initiative, named ironically but intentionally to fund truth investigations. Matteo's documentary premiered at a local theater, not for profit but for closure. In the final scene, he captured Miriam standing by the sea, eyes closed, whispering, "We remember so it doesn't happen again." The audience didn't clap at first, they just sat there, breathing the weight of it, understanding. When they finally applauded, it felt like prayer. I received a message one evening, an email without subject, from an unfamiliar address. The attachment was a photo. 2 women standing side by side, smiling. One was me. The other was her, Celia Brandt's daughter. The caption read, "Sisters, finally knowing." My breath caught, my hands shaking as I showed Miriam. She smiled through tears, nodding slowly. "She looks like you," she said. "Or maybe you look like her." The idea didn't hurt anymore. It healed. I replied with just 3 words, "I found you." There was no need to explain how many years it had taken to reach that sentence. That night, we sat on the porch watching the tides slide under the moonlight. Miriam leaned against me, her voice quiet but clear. "Do you think truth ever really ends?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. "No," I said finally. "It just becomes part of who we are." She nodded, smiling faintly. "Then I'm glad it's part of you." The stars hung patient above the dark sea, and for once, the silence between us wasn't heavy, it was home. When I tell this story now, I don't speak about revenge. I speak about reclamation, about mothers and daughters who refuse to stay buried under paperwork. I speak about the cost of love measured not in pain but in persistence. Some call it justice, others call it closure. I just call it the day I learned that the truth, once found, never leaves empty-handed. If this story found you tonight, remember this. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy, it rebuilds. Like, share, and subscribe so another heart lost in the dark can finally find its way home.